talking about that before. We're going to be opening up this track, You Snooze, You Lose, in our mix masterclass, and all the, like techniques and philosophies and tricks that we're going to be discussing with you will be applied back to this one. We're going to track up and I'm going to show you how I mix it from top to bottom, how the processing was done on all the individual elements. We had a bunch of different instruments in that track, and basically how I took the mix from point A to point B and delivered it to Johnny.
Awesome.
We got sound?
Yeah, we got sound. However, sorry, guys. Keep an eye on this guy over here.
Yeah.
For some reason, it just keeps on going back down to off for some reason, but seems like we have sound for now. But anyway,
this is our first one, so we're trying this out. We're trying to make it right.
So I guess we could dip into our question basket, guys, in the chat. Just like let it rip, whatever you guys are curious about, send it through. But we did receive some questions via like Facebook and all that. But we'll start with a question that just came in here. Hey guys, who is your biggest inspiration for drumming in your life? So that's probably maybe for me. I know Derek drums a little bit, but my favorite drummer his name is Josh Freese, LA drummer, plays on tons of like incredible rock records. Among my favorite records is Perfect Circle, and a lot of other stuff, and John Bonham as well, a drummer for Led Zeppelin. I draw a lot of inspiration from my playing style, playing feel, musicality and dynamics and strength. He's a very like heavy, hard drummer, and I kind of like gravitate towards that. When I was younger, I was really into Chad Smith, and he's the drummer for the Chili Peppers, and and a whole bunch of other drummers. But I mean, I think those are the first like couple that kind of come to mind. Derek drums.
I drum. I mean, I've been drumming over the last couple of years, not as long as Dave, but I mean, I love the instrument. I love recording the instrument, and I love playing the instrument. It's a lot of fun. I wish I played more. But I mean, I've loved a million drummers over the years. I mean, I was just thinking of Ginger Baker as one. There's a time that I really enjoyed listening to Carter Beauford and Chad Smith, like they've said. I mean, there's so many, classic, amazing drummers. Elvin Jones, like a big jazz fan for a while. And just so many great drummers. I don't know.
Hello to Roxanne, to PY, Angelica, Tom. PY is asking me to describe Josh Freese's business card. So when we were out in Vancouver to record some stuff with The Damn Truth, there was a business card pinned on the bulletin board of the studio, the Warehouse Studio, and it was Josh Freese's business card. So his business card just says unlisted, no phone number, no email address, no contact info for drummer to hire, Josh Freese, unlisted. Thought that was very, very, very cool. I guess he's getting like more than enough work. Doesn't really need to get phoned up. All right, so sorry, I'm getting messages over here. Looks good. All right, let's dip into the questions. So, Derek,
pick a good one.
We'll start with you. Do you have a go-to vocal chain?
A go-to vocal chain. I guess when we open up Johnny's track, we'll look at the vocal chain I use there. I don't know that I have a go-to vocal chain that's copy-paste from session to session, but typically what I like to do is I like to start with some EQ, and I like to scoop out things that I don't like. Then I usually like to de-ess. It's more corrective stuff off the top, and then later on I'll put stuff that accentuates the sound more. So like corrective stuff like EQ and de-essing usually come at the top, and then after that I'll probably put some kind of harmonic saturation if needed. I find most of the time it's just needed anyway. I mean, just even in a small amount, it's usually really good. Some more EQ boosting stuff at that point. Maybe a compressor, light compression. And there could be more stuff and less stuff, but usually I'll have something along those lines to get a vocal sound. And then there's probably, tons of like effects in parallel, compression in parallel, reverb, delays, whiteners. I mean, there's lots of stuff.
Very good, Derek.
As
a B question, yes. What is your favorite compressor?
My favorite compressor. I don't have a favorite compressor. I have a lot of compressors that I like. It's hard to pick a favorite because they all do something different, and depending on what you need at that point of the mix, I mean, if you're looking for something fast, something slow, something very aggressive, something very mild, I mean, different stuff's gonna be required. But I think the one compressor, I don't know, it's hard to say my favorite, but the one that I use most often than not, if it was if I could only choose one to work with, I'd probably work with an 1176 or an 1176 style compressor. I find it's the most versatile of the compressors. It's incredibly easy to use. I don't have to think too much. I usually just set it up the same way, give or take, and it sounds great. So, I mean, that's always my starting point. And so I'll go with 1176.
I would say the same thing. I like the 1176 as well, pretty much like across the board. It's great for rock, and it has an aggressive sound, and it's very biting, and it's very, very, very energizing to a source like a guitar or a vocal. It just gives it teeth and attack and bite and brings it front. And I think that's a good one. So a question about bass. So what's your go-to bass recording technique?
You want to answer that one?
Sure, I could talk about what I like to do for bass. So combination of recording the DI as well as recording the amp. I really like to record the amp while the band is playing. While later on down the mix, I may end up using just the DI or just the cabinet, but I like to have both when we record. The bass player is here in the studio playing, so whatever is going through his pedals, like to feed it like into the amp and record that sound through the amp. One or two mics. We have 421s here in the studio that we really like, SM7s. On the bass chain, I'll listen to the bass player's pedals, and if the sound coming out the back end of the pedals still has a very good bottom end, then I'll record the bass signal DI with all those pedals in the chain. If I hear that the bass sound coming through the DIs is like a little thinner, sometimes bass players use like guitar pedals, or they'll use like effect boxes that kind of kill like the low end a little bit. Then I'll tend to not like record the pedals in the chain. So send the pedals to the amp, but not to the DI. And keep in mind, we're recording here into multi-track over several channels, so I can have the DI with or without effects on one track, and then one or two or three or more microphones on the cab. So usually, DI and the cab. For running out of inputs, then I'll for sure take the DI. Like if it's a big session over here and we're kind of like down to the wire, or like it's a 13-piece band or something like wild like that, then I'll be sure just to get at least like the DI and forego the amp. But I mean, bass players really appreciate having their amps recorded. I like the sound of it. I like to hear through the speakers while we're tracking.
It's a great answer, Dave.
That's my way. I don't know.
It's his way. It's a great way.
So we got another question here. Multi-tracking versus live tracking.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Ted from Idaho wants to know.
So I think that when it comes to live tracking versus multi-tracking, I mean, the band that you're working with or the artist that you're working with is kind of going to dictate whether they can record really fully live or if they need to be recorded like one element at a time in multi-track style. So I wouldn't say that as a hard, fast rule. I would start out doing live tracking with a band, but if a band is really able to deliver, like at least a great like drum and bass track together, we'll try to get at least like the bass and drums together. We have a few spaces in the studio, so we can isolate the bass signals from the drum signals and the guitar amps. Everybody will be in different rooms. So, I mean, the band can play together, and then we can kind of build from whatever was great in that live tracking. But I think invariably, like on most productions, you'll end up kind of building from the drums, But I'd like to try to get the band to play live and capture some sort of a cohesive feel or a cohesive moment, when people are together, it feels different from when they're playing to a click. They tend to play more intuitively, I find, or they tend to play more based on feel. So for some styles, that's the right way to go. And for other styles, I mean, you want that kind of like more rigid, I guess, kind of like multi-tracked feel, possibly more produced, is it the result of the multi-track thing? I don't know if you would say.
The genre will call for what, like the production style and choice is going to be. So I mean, if you want to sound modern, like they said, it's, a bit more multi-tracked, overdub, a bit more rigid. And then if you want it to be a bit more loose and organic and old school, because, a lot of modern productions don't have that feel anymore, then you do it live and try not to edit too much,
I agree.
The band has to play well, though. You're at the mercy of the band. You do whatever you want. If they're a bad band, if they're not tight, then you're going to have to do the edits. I don't want to say bad. It's the wrong word. But, if they're not tight, then you're going to have to edit. And if they're super tight, then that's what it is.
Comment comes in, says, great answer indeed. That's directed to you. So we have another question here. Question is, at the Freq Shop, are you working only with professionals, or do you record songs with passionate amateurs? So I guess the answer is both. I mean, we work with professional artists and we work with amateurs or lovers of music. So, I mean, ultimately what we're trying to do here is to push people to take the recording process seriously and to, you know, be prepared for the session. And, you know, we like to work with people who are like very engaged in music and the creative process. So if you're passionate about the music you're making, then yeah, for sure, maybe we can work together, of course. I mean, I think that the love of music is at the heart of the projects that we do, and it should be at the heart of, you know, the people who are approaching us about the music they want to make.
Yeah, I think if you know, if your definition of professional means that you're making a living off music and an amateur is you're not, if that, you know, I mean, we work with both. It's hard to really, in my mind, you know, what's professional or not. I usually like to guide my choices in working with clients based on the quality of their music. I don't really, you know, for better or worse, I don't really care about how good their career is going. I mean, obviously, better careers help like highlight our studio. I'm not gonna lie, but I usually just follow if I like the band. So if no one's heard the band and no one's gonna hear the band, but I'm gonna love working on the project, then I'm gonna work on the project. And if the band is, you know, touring the world and playing on big stages and all that stuff, I mean, if they have great songs, then I'm going to do it. And if they don't have great songs, you know, I'll probably not do it. I mean, I think, you know, like one thing that we tell every client have, we need the first time, whatever capacity, whether it's here inside the studio, like, I would tell them, just make sure you work with the right producer. You know, if it's me, if it's somebody else, I mean, you have to make this record. It's important to you in whichever way it's important to you, whether it's just to keep it for yourself or to put it out because it's your career. And then, you know, it's important that you choose to build a team around you in the production that is going to, you know, like help you achieve what it is that you want to achieve and like bring those songs to life, you know, like in a very natural and enjoyable way. I mean, it's difficult working on productions. Like, I mean, they're very time consuming. It's very like, you know, like hard work. And if you're, you know, with the wrong people, then it might make it for a very difficult and unenjoyable experience. And that, like, to me is the antithesis of why we do this. I mean, I do it because it's enjoyable. There's long nights, there's difficult moments, there's times that it's, you know, you're struggling to keep the focus, but all in all, it's because we love it. So, I mean, that's, you know, first and foremost, the most important thing.
All
Questions.
Right. So I'm just gonna throw in a keep them coming, folks, into the chat box here. Thanks for all the questions. So we'll tip into these guys over here. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about Johnny's track.
Sure.
So I got a question here for you, Derek. Give me a sec while I pull it up. Kind of jumbled them up. So what was it like to produce John Jacob Magistery in the track you're going to be taking apart on September 20th?
It was definitely a very, you know, challenging, but in a positive way session. I think like Johnny is very, you know, creative and intelligent and super talented. He's a great songwriter, surrounds himself with great musicians. And like, I think the challenge was necessarily like a bad thing where it was difficult to work on these tracks. I think the challenge was just, it was, you know, constantly, how could I do better? How could I push this further? How could I make this more exciting? How could we, you know, just take it up a notch, take it to the next level? And like, I mean, everyone involved in the production, you know, from the engineering staff to the musicians to the songwriters, everybody. I mean, like, there was a lot of great ideas. There was a lot of like, you know, like positive vibes in the studio, and it was a lot of fun to put together. It was just, again, like when you enjoy the music you're working on and like you're really excited about it, then it makes it just that much more easier to be creative and like push the boundaries and, you know, like make the song the most it could be. So like, I mean, all in all, it was a lot of fun. Like, I mean, we got to record on that track in particular. I mean, I got to record a dulcimer for the first time in my life, which was a lot of fun. We recorded violins. We had drums, a slew of keyboards. I mean, we had like 3 different kinds of synthesizers, piano, lots of vocals, back vocals. I mean, it was just, he threw everything in the kitchen sink at us, and it was just fun. I mean, from an engineering standpoint and a production standpoint, to put all these things together, record them, get those sounds, you know, like get the performances. You know, when you're working with great musicians, it's not always about the first track, first take, excuse me, because they can't get, you know, better afterwards. It's like you just want to push them to, you know, from great to excellent to even more excellent, or that's, I don't know, more excellent is the wrong way to say it, but that's the idea. And then mixing it was just a lot of fun to him. It was just piecing it together and like playing with all these effects. It was very dreamy and moody, spooky kind of song. So it's fun to mix.
Definitely a very cool track. Tell us about the setup for the initial kind of like capturing of the band, because I remember the setup was very cool, it's very unique, and I don't think it was a setup that we necessarily did in that way on too many sessions.
Probably never again. I think it was the only time I set it up this way. I mean, Johnny wanted to absolutely record the band live off the floor. So, you know, like back to the answer that Dave gave before, this was a situation where what you hear on You Snooze, You Lose is a performance in the sense of, you know, there was definitely a little bit of editing going on, but I'd say it was extremely minor, if any, you know, like, I mean, basically what you hear there is the drum, bass, the 3 synthesizers and the, or 2 synths out of 3, excuse me, because there's only 2 guys on them, and Johnny on piano, all live. Vocals and back vocals and violins and dulcimer were all overdubbed, but everything else was live off the floor. I don't even think I edited it. He didn't want me to edit it. So it was like, that's the performance from my recollection.
There was also something about the actual setup in the live room.
Setup in the live room, yeah. We had drums. Everyone was set up in the live room. So, I mean, obviously synthesizers go in DI, so you don't have to worry about bleed, and bass as well. We just went DI, and I think we reamped later. But the drums and the piano were in the same room. And that was, you know, if you were going to go back to the question before about challenges, that was a challenge, because trying to get a punchy drum sound and an articulate and like crisp piano sound with them being in the same room, which is, you know, about 450 square feet, was an immense challenge. So I baffled all the I put a bunch of baffles, all around the piano, and I really isolated him, which didn't really do anything, to be honest. But the piano mics, I had a pair of KM184s, which are small diaphragm condenser mics, and they were, you know, the left, right on the piano, and I think I had a pair of 57s also attached to them. I don't know if I used both or not, but those mics ended up being drum room mics anyway, you know. So it was mostly piano with a lot of drums in there too. So I mean,
there was a lot of bleed between the two.
Lots of bleed. I mean, I would have loved to, not easy to mix. I would have preferred not doing it that way, but he absolutely wanted to be in the room, even though we didn't see them. It was a bit tough, and like we needed the booth for like a guitar amp, or not a guitar amp, but we needed an amp in the booth. It might have been the bass.
Now, Johnny also sang live on the take, so live vocals, live piano, live
but
drums.
We didn't keep the vocals. We overdubbed the vocals afterwards. I mean, he sang live. His intention was to do it all live. He really wanted that vibe, and then, you know, I don't think he delivered a fantastic vocal performance, but I mean, it wasn't up to par for him. So I was pretty relieved, honestly, because I mean, if there was drums in the vocal mic, that would have been even worse. I mean, we're talking about, like, you know, it's still somewhat of a pop production, if you will, and like having that much bleed,
it's hard to manage.
Very hard.
But I mean, already on the tracks, listening to the piano mics, you'll have drum bleed, you'll have vocal bleed.
Yeah, little vocal, but it's there, you know.
Something really interesting to check out, I guess. I mean, this is all part of like the song that Derek's going to be taking apart on September 20th for the mixing masterclass. So we'll be basically doing it over virtual live stream, similar to this, but I mean, with audio, high-res audio, with screen capture coming off of Pro Tools, going through the mix process for mixing this whole track, going through all the elements in the arrangement, from the drums to the bass, the vocals, all the keys, synths, and the rest of it. But in addition to just kind of pulling apart a song, you know, Derek and I will be talking about our mix templates and just the process that we go through to kind of like mix a little easier, mix a little quicker, mix a little more sure, mix a little more focused. You know, I know for a long time for myself, there was a strong challenge in like just like pushing in a direction when it came time to mix, or like finding difficulty reaching an endpoint to a mix, or just getting it to where, you know, you're happy with the sound and whatnot. And like over the years, you know, just kind of learned a lot of tricks and gotten a lot of practice. So September 20th is going to be a great opportunity to learn like in depth about that. But I mean, we're here now. So if you guys do have any questions about mixing, fire away, please. Our mic is still going. Thank you, Derek.
I hope so.
So let's dip into another one here. What's your favorite EQ to get a big low end?
To get a big low end, I mean, the Pultec always works really good, really well. You got 20, 30, 60, and 100 hertz on most of the plugins. We have a Pultec style analog EQ by a company called Mercury here, and I believe the frequencies are pretty much that, maybe with 200, but like it really helps boost the low end nicely. I like it a lot. I mean, Waves makes a plugin called R-Bass. So when you need a lot of extreme low end, there's that as well. Those are probably the two that I'll use most. I don't find that I really have trouble getting a lot of big low end in my mixes. I find like usually it's the opposite. I'm trying to get rid of some. But I mean those two plugins or analog pieces are fantastic.
Nice choice, Derek. I also like the Pultec as well.
It's a goodie.
So how long does it take you to mix a song?
Oof. I've been asked this question before, and I usually answer. Sometimes clients ask me, and it's anywhere from, I guess, 1 hour to a couple of months. I don't know. it could be anywhere in there. I mean, there's different factors that determine that, like the time spent. I mean, does a track have 100 tracks or 20 tracks or 5 tracks? What's really required in the work to get it there. Sometimes it's also you might go through a lot of rounds of tweaks by request from the client. But I mean, on a typical, if you're going to talk about a standard pop production, just give me drums, bass, guitars, keys, vocals, back vocals, and it's a 3-4 minute song. Again, if it's a 7-minute song or a 1.5 minute song, they're a bit more rare, but it'll take a bit less or more time. But anyways, about a day, I'd say, like a good 10-hour day, I could, mix a song from start to finish. Then I'll usually, if I have the luxury of time, I'll wait a day or two, go back to it, probably spend maybe a couple of hours tweaking it. And then I deliver it to the client. They usually have some requests, spend probably another couple of hours there, tweaking some stuff some more. And then again, if there's another round of requests, usually, that those requests, like tweaks end up being less and less time. Sometimes it's just 10 minutes, or could you just boost the vocal up a bit or whatever. But, I'd say like maybe in total a day and a half, something like that.
There was another question about the revisions. So, I mean, I know you kind of...
We offer unlimited revisions. I mean, we want our clients to be happy. I want to be happy. If a song is going to go out into the world and people hear it 20 times or 2 million times, I mean, it doesn't really matter. If one person hears it, then I want it to be the best that it could be. If just the band hears it, I want them to be happy with it. But I mean, the idea is that like I want to, do good work. I mean, I take a lot of pride in I put a lot of positive vibes into my work. I think it's important, for the sake of the art, to do the best you can. I think it's important to not overstep that and go too crazy. I mean, you could get lost in mixes. People spend forever on some mixes. I've been culprit to that myself. But keep your focus and perspective and try and work fast. Put a timer if you want. Take a lot of breaks. Breaks are important. The more breaks you take, the fresher your your ears and your mind is, and then you can make better decisions. So, but ultimately, that's the amount of time it takes to do a mix.
Pretty good, man. So, do you automate the drums heavily in a mix?
Ooh. You want to answer that one?
Sure. I think a lot of differently in all songs, but I don't know if heavily is the right word. I think some songs you can get away with just like a kind of static kind of, if you're talking about multi-mic'd drum kits, you can get a great sound static, that'll last the whole track. And you might just
what kind of automation are you talking about, right? Now you're talking about volume automation.
Yeah, so I mean, you can get away with no automation sometimes with just like a great balance of tracks. But sometimes on a track, for example, you might want to bring room mics down when the drummer's ripping on the ride, or there's a section in a song where he's got a nice little hi-hat part, and you want to bring that hi-hat out. So definitely automating certain sections of the drum kit for certain sections of the song is like not out of place, or you might want to mute like whole sections of your drum tracks in certain places if they really have no value to the part. So I don't know if there's a tom part really just in the intro of a song, and the rest of the song you really don't need those toms, and you can dump them in some situations. That's that's good too. But I like to automate kind of like the sum of the drums. You know, all of my drums usually go to a bus, and I'll label that like my drum bus, and I can automate that drum bus up and down. So at a minimum, it's like when the energy of a song picks up, and the drums will pick up with that energy of the song and like, you know, boost it for that chorus or boost it for that solo or whatever it is. I also like often have elements of the drums like coming up on parallel channels. So if I want to send, I don't know, for example, a bunch of the close mics, you know, like snare top, tom top, floor tom top, kick in, like send those to a bus so they appear together on a track. You know, I can really like play with like the attack of like those drums for certain parts of the songs, or pull it out altogether. So I think your creativity is going to dictate what you want to do, but also problem solving will dictate what you want to do. If like, again, you know, I said something about the cymbals before, if the cymbals are just like way too out of control in a section, then, you know, while I'm sitting in front of the computer mixing this song for 10 hours, it's like every time that section comes around, it's just going to hit me in the face every single time. So I'll usually just try to address it and move on, you know, pull those cymbals down or get it to a point where they're not in the way. You can automate EQ, you can automate your effects, you can automate your volumes, you can automate your pans, you can really do a lot. And I think anything that comes to your mind creatively, I'll do. And again, like, you know, looking at the problems in a song or looking at the problems in that drum kit to kind of deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, the part has to sound right. So, I mean, if it doesn't require any automation and it sounds right, then leave it. And if it requires a lot, then do it. I mean, typically when I'm mixing, like I'm constantly automating. I mean, drums, any instrument, all instruments. But like if you're talking about drums, like Dave said, a lot of the times it's changing the levels or the balance of the drums with, you know, close mics and far mics and how much or how little I want, and that, you know, gives a lot of energy to a song. Like sometimes you just want really like tight like dry drums, and sometimes you want them to explode in a section and add more room. Sometimes you want them to go from mono to stereo. So I mean, everything Dave highlighted, like 100%. Like, I mean, effects, I'll do a lot of effect automation, bringing in saturation, taking it out, boosting like EQ, you know, values, and then bringing them down. Like the amount of compression, like it could be more or less. I mean, it's endless. I mean, that's the fun part.
I think also there's like an instance where you get songs where it's almost like there's two different songs within the song. You know, it's like a ballady first half and then like a big epic ending or something like that. And then you really need to almost like construct like two different drum sounds or two different tones on an instrument to really suit the different parts. With like that happens often with bass and with drums. So I mean, the tools are there. So I say automate, do it. Do you mix differently if a piece of music will live exclusively on YouTube or Instagram? Pretty interesting question.
It's a good one. Who asked that? Do you mind? Am I allowed?
Everything after 0.
It's a great question.
After 0.
Yes and no. I don't know. It's I do. You take it.
Well, listen, honestly, I don't think I've ever been really crafted with the responsibility of needing to mix something like exclusively for Instagram, for example. But I mean, there's some considerations if
we've done some live sessions that only live on YouTube, I guess, you know.
I guess so. I mean, I'm thinking about like you know, what people will play through their phone, like just on like the speaker, you know, they'll be on Instagram or they'll be on Facebook, you know. And a lot of that comes out in mono. So when you got your, you know, the guy's listening to your work on the phone, he's not listening through the guy. The guy.
Sometimes girls listen to our music too, you know.
You just listen. The guy's just listening through the speaker of the phone. So everything is kind of coming out in mono. So I don't think necessarily I'll mix in mono for the phone or mix in mono for YouTube or mix. But, you know, when I mix, I do spend a lot of time listening to the mix in mono. So that's basically how your mix is going to sound through a TV. It's how it's going to sound coming out of an iPhone if it's uploaded to Instagram. A lot of times, like, we deliver music to artists and they put it up on Facebook, and lo and behold, I don't know what button they clicked, but it's in mono and it's super low res, you know? Yeah. So, I mean, the consideration for me is to try to make sure that it sounds good in mono. Often in mono, things like guitars and synths and things that are like spread out wide, they tend to disappear when collapsed into mono. Collapsed into mono just basically means the left and right speaker, the left and right signal appear on the same speaker. So they kind of combine and you get a lot of phase cancellation, comb filtering, and whatever is panned out wide tends to lose its distinction and definition. So I'll spend a lot of time listening in mono just to make sure that it's like those panned elements, when they're combined, there's a way to EQ them so that they kind of cut through a little bit better. You know, if your elements in both speakers sound too similar, often when they come together in mono, they'll cancel each other out. So I like to kind of make things a little different on the left than they do on the right. So again, when they come together in mono, they have a little bit of space for each other. Now, I don't think you're necessarily mixing specifically for a format in that way. I think you're mixing smart so that wherever it plays, kind of sounds good, or as good as it can.
I mean, a mix should be a mix, and you know, like nowadays you have to consider like where people are going to listen to it, because you know, like they've said, like whether it's an album cut or a YouTube video. I mean, like you're going to listen to it on a phone, you're going to listen to it on like different speaker systems. So I think, you know, a mix is a mix. I just try and do the best mix. I don't really have a different like approach to doing it for Instagram or YouTube or for, you know, whatever, like hi-fi speakers or whatever. And like the mono thing is the one consideration that like maybe a lot of people like overlook. But you know, even outside of YouTube, I mean, and outside of your telephone, if the track is going to be played in all kinds of other systems in the real world, like a lot of them are mono, so does it sound good in mono?
Yeah. It really pisses me off when I give clients a mix or something that they're going to put on a teaser and it goes on Facebook and it's like in mono. So check your stuff before you upload.
No mono,
and that's your warning.
And if you want mono, don't work with Dave, because he gets pretty angry about it. He calls you late at night,
vocally angry, and I'll call you and I'll give you shit about it. It's absolutely, totally true. I'm sure some people can attest to that.
He sends 24 pizzas to your door, then you got to pay for them.
Exactly. I just want to throw in here that if you guys are watching this and you're not following us on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. Hope to do stuff like this more often. It would be a big help to us as well if we grow this thing with you. So thank you. So yeah, everything after 0 is jack. So it's the mono issue I was alluding to. Thanks, guys. Thanks, great Jack. Answer. No problem, man. Check your stuff in mono. All right. So we'll go back into, can you mix a record on headphones? Can you mix a record on headphones, Derek?
Whether you can or you can't, I have. So I guess the answer is yes. I mean, you definitely can. I've mixed a couple of records on headphones, a couple of records that I really enjoyed mixing that ended up sounding really cool. So, I mean, the answer is yes. Is it my ideal way of mixing a record? The answer is no. I've come to get very comfortable mixing on headphones, though. I mean, I'd say at least half of my mix is done on my Sennheiser HD 600s, or maybe not half, 40%. And then like maybe another 40% is done on these focals, and then 20% on the NS10s. But that's the combination I like to use when I mix. But I've mixed like, you know, two full records and an EP actually completely on those Sennheisers, and they sound great, and they work. The clients were happy. It was a very difficult experience. I mean, like you don't have that, like mono. I didn't have access to a studio at the time. I had moved to California. I was mixing some of these, like in my house, and like I had to do them on cans, and they turned out well. They sound great. It was just like it took a lot longer. It took a lot longer to do. I mean, it's a lot harder, but you could do it. You just need a good pair of like headphones that you could trust. The Sennheisers are very, very great sounding open back headphones. I mean, to me, they just sound like I'm listening to my Focal Twins almost. So, I mean, it's a real treat to work with them. If you're using earbuds, perhaps not. I mean, you'll probably be, but then again, I mean, who knows, whatever. If it sounds good and you got there, then you could use whatever. It just might make it a little harder.
Maybe for Derek.
For Dave, but for Dave, you could do it 100% on headphones.
Not 100% on headphones. No, but I really love to mix on headphones. In fact, I like to use headphones. I like to use earbuds. And as long as I start my mix, not start my mix, but as long as I like do like the drums, let's say, and the bass, like a little bit in front of the speakers.
You're not allowed in front of the speakers. We're saying top to bottom.
I didn't know you were putting a condition.
Headphone, that's the condition.
So I think that you can definitely mix on headphones if you're using great references, or you're using your reference material well. And what I mean by reference material well is kind of like taking the time while you're mixing to listen to, for example, the song which inspired the song you're mixing, or the song which is inspiring your mix. So, you know, if I'm mixing a track for an artist, I'll always try to get some references from the artist sonically for just the feel, you know, and then also for elements within that mix, like what kind of vocal effects you like, what kind of like a drum sound you like, that type of thing. So if you can't rely on, if you can only rely on your headphones, then what you can also do is like rely on your kind of like your muscle memory, you know, by checking out a reference, listening to your mix, tweaking, going back to that reference, coming back, tweaking a little more. I find that I do that a lot when I mix. It's like, you know, there's even been instances where I mix with a timer, 10-minute timer, and every 10 minutes, get back to the reference and just kind of like reset that kind of like muscle memory of the ear to the brain. When you're mixing, it's kind of like you can travel down kind of like dark paths for long periods of time, and your brain kind of gets like a little bit lost in the process. Start to feel like what's coming out of the headphones sounds good, but it's maybe a little bit off. So it's good to kind of like reset that ear and reset your mind and check out like the reference and come back to it. That way you can know if your bottom end is right, or the panning, or the whatever, the front to back, whatever element it is that you're kind of working on. But I mean, for headphones, I really, you know, it's been about a year. I started mixing also with earbuds, and I really love mixing with earbuds. And I know that's not too common. I mean, I know that a lot of people
don't want to hear it. I prefer mixing on headphones. I definitely do have a preference. I just like that it's in my head. You know, it's not in the room. It's right there. But I'll take the reference thing further. You know, the reference, whether you're mixing on headphones or speakers, you should always have that reference. I don't think it makes any difference if you're on one system or another. But I think what Dave was alluding to is just like, you know, like understanding how that reference works in that system. So like, I mean, if you're working in a new studio for the first time, if you just got a fresh pair of speakers, if you got a pair of headphones and you want to learn the frequency response of that headphone, then it's good to have a song or a couple of songs too that, you know, like aren't necessarily even part of that production, but you just know them well. You've heard the, you know, like pick your favorite song, listen to it in a car, listen to it on earbuds, listen to it on better headphones, listen to it on 2 or 3 speakers, listen to it at your friend's house, listen to it on your computer, listen to it on your phone, and listen to that same song and see how every system will make that song sound a little different. The low end response is going to be a bit different. The vocal placement is going to be a bit different of that same song. But then you learn, okay, in this system, this is how the vocals, you know, like are placed, and you're going to run that through a bunch of different songs, and you're going to learn how those headphones, or you're going to learn what they're telling you, you know, because it might sound good to you, but if the headphones, you know, if that's not the way they're built, then you're just going to be doing things like a little off balance on speakers, on headphones, whatever.
Let me just check this thing real quick. Can you just hop there? I just want to see if the mic is still going. Thanks, guys, for all the questions. This is, by the way, a lot of fun.
It's going.
Really appreciate everyone who's hanging out with us and throwing in the questions. We have another question here in the chat. Who are your top 3 inspirations?
Just inspirations. Dave T, my parents, and Dave T again. I don't know. No, that's a bad answer, but you answer first and I'll...
I mean, for the matter at hand, I'm not too sure. I mean, you know, a lot of the inspiration comes from music, you know, different artists that kind of like inspire thoughts and inspire kind of like creative journeys in the studio. You know, I mean, when we come in here and we work with an artist, it's kind of like the musical library in my head inspires this, you know, inspires the pedal, inspires the, you know, so I don't know if I can necessarily say that that's a top inspiration, but I mean, that whole musical library is very hard to like narrow down to like, you know, specific things. You know, when I pull up stuff to mix, you know, I have a lot of reference material that I'm taking from mix engineer Chad Blake, who was a great inspiration for me for mixing in terms of getting like really great sounds. I always pull up the Nirvana Nevermind record as a reference, who was mixed by Andy Wallace, you know. So I think for like kind of like mixing and that type of stuff, I'm often listening to those two things for a lot of the mixes, you know, just for like that punch and the low end. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily an inspiration.
You know, okay, so I'll take a mixer. I mean, there's so many. A lot of the ones that Dave mentioned are great. I went through a point where I enjoyed a lot of Rich Costi mixes, so I'll pick him as my mixer. But I mean, there's a million great mixers. In terms of production, it's kind of like like an obvious answer, but Rick Rubin is definitely a great producer. I love Rick Rubin. And then in terms of I'm a guitar player, so I'll pick a guitar player. I'll pick Jimi Hendrix. I mean, I love Jimi Hendrix. Who doesn't love Jimi Hendrix? So those are three mixer, producer, musician influences. And then like Dave said, like there's so many things that like are part of your own being that influence and inspire the work that you're doing. And it's not always music related too. I mean, like sometimes you're inspired by like poetry or people in your life, or like different forms of art. Like, I mean, there's so much inspiration. The life that you're living, I mean, there's everything like molds you into something and like puts you in a state of mind at that moment when you're creating. So I mean, there's inspiration. The world is full of inspiration. So it's all over the place.
Thank you, Derek. So really good question coming in here. So I'll fire that off at you because I think maybe you can relate to it slightly, but So tips for an artist who wants to record at home and hire you to mix the track.
And hire me to mix the track.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think there's like several elements at play here. I mean, the person is recording at home, doing the production themselves, I presume. So
yeah, I think like before anything else, performance is always the most important thing. Whether you're in a like expensive recording studio or if you're in like your bedroom, just get a great performance. If you're recording vocals, I'd rather hear a bit more of a lo-fi quality into the recording in terms of like the technical part of it, but an amazing kick-ass vocal performance. I mean, that's just a lot more important, right? So you're at home, first and foremost, make sure you got the performance. If it's an instrument or it's a vocal or whatever, just get the best performance possible, And then after that, I mean, try and treat your room, your acoustic space as best as you can. I mean, if you know a little bit about room acoustics, obviously, if you have a lot of reflective surfaces, then it's going to make it sound a lot more reverberated. And if you're able to dampen like a space, even if it's putting a mattress up against the wall or taking some curtains and covering windows or anything that's going to stop reflectivity on like hard surfaces like wood or gyp or anything of the sort, glass, then you're going to get a much more controlled sound. So I think if you could just manage room acoustics and great performances, that's the bulk of a good sound. And then the rest of it, listen, if you don't have very expensive microphones and preamps and converters, well, I mean, that's gear. You could always buy gear. But to me, it's acoustics and performance that like are super important. So focus on that at home, and it'll give me something to work with after, I think.
I agree. I think that performance negates like all sonic quality in a sense. It's like if the performance is great, it really doesn't matter how good technically it's recorded or bad it's recorded. It's like I've mixed stuff where somebody sends in a vocal through an iPhone mic and it ends up sounding great because the performance is great. But I would also suggest or add that if you've made the decision to work with a particular mixer, mastering engineer, whatever it is, other musicians or whoever you're collaborating with, it's like take them along for the process a little bit, and if you want to have the track mixed by Derek or by myself, it's like we can hear the song in its pre-prod stages and chime in and give you maybe some ideas where, if you feel like you want to forego working with a producer, well, you can kind of have some of the benefits of at least bouncing some ideas back and forth with someone who can listen to your music objectively, because I mean, the technical recordings is part of it, but I mean, a lot of what we do for artists is help make that song a better song or a better arrangement. So if you want to work with us, then I would say reach out to us, and like we'll kind of like be along the journey for the production of the song while you work on it, completely by yourself. So not completely by yourself, but you do it in your own space and you do it in your own way. So I mean, that could be a consideration for anyone you decide to work with at any stage in the process. If you want to hire a drummer, you want to hire a musician or a mix engineer, I would say kind of like make contact and start to share some songs. You might get some like great ideas from the people you intend to collaborate with. So thank you for that question. Super great question. It's at home and you had to mix their track. I guess, I mean, just to finish that thought, it's like, I mean, if there's anything you can do to clean up the tracks or cut things out that ultimately you don't want to end up in the mix down the line, noises or that type of thing, really good labeling is really, really, really a nice treat to receive tracks that are kind of like organized. Anyway,
I think when, like I also try and articulate this to like clients. So whether it's, in a situation like this, it's definitely very pertinent, right? So there's a difference between mixing a song and editing a song, right? So sending a song and mastering a song. Like, sometimes these lines are blurred. People don't know the difference between mastering, mixing, and editing. So if you send me a track that's, not labeled and it's not edited and, all the performances are a little all over the place and all the noises still in the tracks and has to be cleaned and edited, and that's not really mixing. That's called editing. So like all that stuff, like they've said, should be done. Like, if you want me to mix the song, I could edit it too. Make me happy to edit. It's like definitely, to be honest, not my most favorite thing to do, but I mean it's part of the job, and it's an incredibly crucial thing to do. So I love doing it for the sake of, outside of the tediousness of it, it's what really gets a song sounding like a big time stellar pop production, and it's like a super important part of the process. So, whether you do that or you have us do it, it's like there's that important thing. So it's like, I mean, if you want us to mix a track for you, then edit it really well. It'll just give us more time to focus on the mix and less time focusing on correcting, like noises and mistakes that you could be doing yourself.
So another question here, quickly: Strat or SG?
Who asked that one?
P-Wiz.
PY. Both.
Ooh.
No, I mean, Strat for me, it's my favorite guitar. It'll always be my favorite guitar. It doesn't even have to sound the best. It's just really, when I was a kid, I think the first electric guitar I saw was a Strat, so that was it. It doesn't matter. It sounds horrible, but it's burned in my mind. So Strats. And then, a lot of my favorite guitar players growing up, David Gilmour, Jimi Hendrix, John Frusciante, Eric Clapton, were really big Strat players, almost exclusively Strat players. So to me, it's a Strat, and, there's probably a million better sounding guitars. I don't know. It just feels like a guitar. That's how a guitar should feel to me.
Great answer.
Strat.
Okay. So when starting a mix,
Starburst. The red ones don't sound as good as the Sunburst. Excuse me. The red ones don't sound as good as the Sunburst.
My answer would have been when I play drums.
The cream
take
ones
two
are
Strats.
Yeah, and just smash
the drum kits with the Strats.
Because Dave hates Strats.
And then go play an SG.
He's a telly guy.
All right, Derek. So when starting a mix, what do you focus on first?
Usually it's drums. Sometimes it's vocals. I mean, it depends on the style of music. I think it also depends on the song. It's like, what's the most important element in that song, right? So if the song revolves around the bass guitar, then I'd start with the bass. I mean, if that's the focal point of the bass the track, then I'll start there. If it's really like a vocal folk song, which I mean almost all the times they are, then I'll start with the vocal. But I like to lay the foundation. Typically, I'd say more often than not with the drums, get a really good drum sound. The rhythm of the song, is always, to me, the second most important to the vocal. But I mean, without the rhythm, then you don't have anything that's really supporting that vocal. So I start with that. I make it, punchy, big. I kind of create a space for everybody else to sit in. What kind of a drum sound you get dictates the space that everything else lives in. And then I'll build my way up: bass, guitars, keys, whatever, vocal. But I'm typically going, if I do drums, then I'll bring in the vocal and see drum vocal. And then I'll add the bass and then drum, bass, vocal. And then the guitars, drum, bass, guitar, vocal. So make sure that's always working.
I know
different.
Somewhat different, but similar. I mean, I think the convention is to start with drums, or at least to start with kick drum, or I tend to think of whatever the element in the mix is. That's not the most important element, but more the anchor. So whatever is kind of the rock in the mix, whatever is going to kind of be there the whole way through and kind of set the kind of the pace or the dynamic of the song and build around that. So oftentimes it's a kick and snare, or the bass, or if there's no drums, it's a percussion or a main keyboard. It's whatever the element is that's kind of the meat of the song dynamically, you know?
What's driving the song, right? And
yeah, I mean, not necessarily driving your attention, but what it is kind of like really building what's at the foundation of the musical piece. I don't know if that's like a really fantastic answer, but I mean, in most songs, it's going to be like the kick and the bass. So, I mean, I'll start my mix by working on the drums, trying to get at least like a kick and snare and bass, guitar or synth or whatever to really make that song have like a really good bottom end and a great like dynamic, so that it's like the song has like when it's coming out of the speakers, just to have a point that sticks, you know, in the mix. It doesn't always dip too far back. It doesn't like come too far front. It's like find that real good like anchor point in the mix. And one of my weaknesses is that like later down the line, when it comes down to like all the little forgotten elements of the mix, I'll try, you know, my thing lately is to try to get to those first. So like once like drums and bass is kind of there, I'll jump to vocals, or I'll jump to percussion, or I'll jump to a little overdub, and make sure that that little thing that it's like when I get to the end of the mix and I'm running out of time and there's 2 minutes left in the day, you know, I try to get to those really early lately. That's just something I've been doing.
like Strat guitars. If you played a Strat in your mix, you know that Dave's gonna almost forget about putting it in because he just muted it.
But I find that helps me because, I mean, sometimes I get to a point in the mix where it's like the mix is done and it's like I never finished the floor tom, and it's like I'm a drummer, but it's like I rarely really like spend a lot of time on toms for some reason, or just like little parts of the mix that maybe are not major elements, but I've been trying to get to them early so that when I spend a ton of time on guitars or a ton of time on vocal choruses or whatever stuff like that, it's like there isn't forgotten elements in my mix. So I've been doing that. I've been finding it helps me a lot. So guys, we are enjoying this a lot.
Time is it 50?
We're coming towards the kind of like, we're gonna cap it at around 9. We'll see what's happening. But we got another question. A favorite saturation plugin, current favorite method for gluing a mix together at the end.
I love, you know what, Dave just bought this plugin for the studio recently, the BX Townhouse SSL compressor. I mean, I've used a million. I was just thinking about it today. I was like, I have to tell Dave how much I love this compressor. It just sounds amazing. It just glues everything just the way it has to. Like, I mean, we've used Waves, we've used Universal Audio. I don't know if we've used other plugins that emulate the SSL, but
there's other ones.
There's other ones. The ones that I've used.
We have Impact,
you know,
and
Impact,
we have.
But like this one just glues, you know, really nicely. Like I mean, a lot of that glue stuff is master bus processing. So
hang on, I'll say it one more time. Derek said the BX Townhouse. That's a plugin alliance plugin, but it's an emulation of like a type of SSL bus compressor. Super common, probably 90% of
the two that I use a lot. The Lo-Fi plugin, which is stock with Pro Tools. If you're not Pro Tools user, then you know you don't have it. But if you do use Pro Tools, they have a plugin called Lo-Fi that I love. I love it. I don't know what it is. I just love it.
I never use it.
Love it, Dave. That's why my mixes sound a bit better than yours. You use the Lo-Fi, man. I tell them all the time.
Something like that. I really like Decapitator saturation.
Yeah,
it's really good to just bring with the drive knob. It just brings stuff front, you know, front towards you. I like
Radiator
that
by Soundtoys is another good one that I like.
But I mean, most of the time I pull up Decapitator, and I also use the blue guy HG2, another plugin alliance plugin, which sounds really good. And Derek mentioned the BX Townhouse, so I think that's a great one as well. All right. Do you prefer recording drums with a lot of mics, or to use a simpler, more sparse setup?
That's a good question as well. I'll talk about John Jacob Magistery because it was a really fun setup. So we used a single kick mic. I can't remember exactly which one. I'm sorry. We have a picture, so maybe we could post it in the comments later or something. But like, there was one mic on the snare, one mic on the tom, rack tom, one mic on the floor tom, so 4 mics. We had a mono overhead, which was an R84, which is a ribbon mic, and that was it. And then we had the pair of KM184s, the pencil mics that were pointing at a piano, which was, you know, blocking the drums essentially with a bunch of gobos and like packaging blankets around the piano to isolate it. But they acted as kind of room mics, so I'll call those drum room mics. And that was the drum setup for this track. I've had success with 2 mics, a mono overhead and a kick drum mic. And recently, I've been loving putting up 16 mics. I just had a session a couple of sessions a couple of weeks ago, and both times, I mean, it was, all dressed, kick in, kick out, sub kick, snare top, snare bottom, rack tom, floor tom, hi-hats, so overhead left, center, right, room left, right, mono room. Dave talked about Chad Blake. He uses something called a bone mic. If you don't know what that is, just try and find Chad Blake bone mic. It's probably YouTube videos about it. I personally like that mic too. It's great. I mean, you could put effect mics on the floor. You could use any number of different setups. I think again, like anything else, the production is always going to call for the setup you use. If the production calls for a 2 mic setup, use a 2 mic setup. If the production calls for a 16 mic setup, use a 16 mic setup. And the more you work in production, the more you gain experience and listen to different records and read up on how they were recorded and talk to other engineers and just practice on your own, experience on your own. You'll know at the time what the right setup is, right? If you're referencing, again, like Dave said before, this record, and then you're going to say, okay, well, this record was recorded this way in this studio, this kind of room with these kind of mics, this many mics, then you could compare that to another recording which was done in another way, in another type of room with another amount of mics. And there's plenty of information on the internet. You could find out all that kind of stuff, and then you'll make those right choices when it's time to record. So anything and everything, I should say. It's really so many great setups.
I find that the better the drummer is, the less mics you can actually get away with. So get away with what I mean is, you're really playing, if you're recording a phenomenal
the more
drummer,
mics you need, the more money you have to spend, right? So
that too. But if you're working with a great drummer who can balance themselves very well, or who plays the hi-hat and kick and snare at the appropriate, not at the appropriate, but that balance between the elements, if he can deliver that balance for you, then you can probably get away with 1 mic or 2 mics or 3 mics. So
well placed, strategically placed.
Yeah,
Dave's talking about the balance. If he could actually, it's like, imagine faders. If he could play dynamically the hi-hats and the snare so that they're mixed properly for the mic, right? Yeah. The mic gets that 1 mix, then you don't need 2 faders to balance them, because the drummer did that for you.
Yeah. And then, if you're working with a drummer who is kind of a little, I don't know, his left hand's a little weak and he needs a bit more snare, then, having that mic there can help accentuate that. Having those mics on the toms, or having the spot mics on cymbals, can be really beneficial to bring out that element that he is not really bringing out so well, on his own. So,
but it's not to blame drummers all the time either, because sometimes, again, depending on the style of music, you're just going to need to smash the crash, and even if you're getting a good balance, just the nature of the drums in the room and everything, it's not only about how well the drummer could balance it, but also the way the instrument is interacting in the room and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes you need to supplement that, or again, the production. Maybe I want an excessive amount of something that the drummer can't possibly do naturally, so you're gonna have to do it with multiple mics.
Thanks, man. So comment here, very informative. Thank you very much for this AMA. You're welcome. This was a lot of fun to do. So just want to reiterate again to everybody who joined us today, we're hosting our mixing masterclass on September 20th. Similar vibe to this, though, again, we'll have a high-res sound coming out of Pro Tools, so you can hear all of the audio that we're talking about, and you can hear the examples. We'll be taking you through a mix that Derek delivered for John Jacob Magistery's track. The song is called You Snooze, You Lose. So we're getting into some of this minimalist drum miking that Derek is talking about, acoustic piano, electric bass, a trio of synths, live vocals, violin, dulcimer. The thing is all dressed.
Guitar.
You'll learn a ton about, mixing and, guitars. A ton about mixing, all these individual elements, and lots of helpful tips to kind of get you through your mixes and help you to mix a little smarter, a little faster, a little better. Mm-hmm. Derek will be talking about his mix templates. We'll be talking about some of his tricks. I don't know if there's anything else you want to throw in there.
I stole all my tricks from Chad Blake, so I'm kidding.
The question here is your masterclass going to be available for someone who is busy at the time? It's a really good question. The thing's going to be caught on multiple cameras. So, I mean, maybe there's a way to make that happen. I don't think we necessarily put a plan in place to film and distribute the masterclass. It's an interactive thing. So we'll be taking questions along the way. I think if you missed the masterclass, you may miss the opportunity to ask some questions or to kind of participate or have things clarified. I mean, you know, we're outspoken, but I don't think we're necessarily the most well-spoken either. But, you know, so however, you know, to answer you best, you know, hopefully if the thing goes well, we might be able to get it to you after the fact. I'm not sure.
I mean, it is our intention in the long term to offer online, you know, downloadable online courses. You know, like Dave said, this is more of an interactive thing. It's a great question to ask. Like, and we'll definitely look into it. I mean, if this is something that we feel is, you know, like of quality to release for sale afterwards, or, you know, for download or whatever, then like we'll do it. And if not, I mean, we'll definitely build a mixing class, you know, that we're going to be offering online in the future. It's something that we've been wanting to do for a very long time. So this is just the beginning. So, I mean, like, obviously, if you can't make it live, that's totally cool. There's going to be more of them anyway. And, you know, like whether it's this time or not, again, like maybe, you know, we'll try and figure this out this week, but there's going to be courses available in the future 100%.
I mean, we've been doing these seminars already now for, I think, two years or so, mixing seminar and drum recording seminar. So it's something that, you know, we try to plan for, but I mean, you know, we're making records too, but education is at the core values for Derek and I. So I think there'll just be hopefully more opportunities to do this down the line. I'll ask you guys to get any like last questions in, because we'll probably call it soon. So if you guys have any last questions, I mean, keep an eye on the chat window for another couple of seconds.
Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions about this or anything else. I mean, in the link in the description below, we have a link to our Mix Workshop like info page and registration page. I mean, obviously, if you want to register, that's fine. But like, if you do want to contact us on our website, which is also in that description page, you could contact us, excuse me, through there. Or, you know, if you have a good memory, it's dave@thefreqshop.com or derek@thefreqshop.com. You could, you know, like write to us personally. Like, I mean, we, you know, like talk to people through Instagram, through Facebook. I'm sure if you write comments in this video thread, you know, like even tomorrow, the day after, we will be coming to check it out, and you know, we can answer from there. So, I mean, there's a million different ways to like reach out to us. I mean, our website has all our contact information, so click the links below. You could like definitely don't feel shy. Reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer you guys.
Very good. Very true. Please don't be shy. Reach out. I know a lot of people, sometimes it's kind of like, you know, but come find us, please. Thanks to everyone who's subscribed to our channel. I'll say it again. If you guys are watching us now and you haven't subscribed, please do. We hope to bring you guys more content like this as often as possible. In fact, we're in the process of getting set up to be able to do like more video production like this, and more education, and more YouTube stuff, and more lives and more streams, and so you won't want to miss what's in the pipe. What is the correct tomato sauce brand for an authentic spaghetti sauce base? I think you want to look for canned tomatoes that have San Marzano tomatoes.
He's already said it wrong. You have to get the tomatoes and make your own sauce, Dave.
Sorry,
come on,
I know.
You're Italian.
You know, San Marzano tomatoes, either in a can or real living tomatoes
off the tree, the tomato tree.
But even better than that is they sell these kind of like glass bottles. They're like 1 liter bottles of tomato. I don't know if it's tomato puree. It has a very specific name, but they're those nice glass bottles. So you just start with that, and I mean, you only need to cook it just a little bit. Garlic, basil, salt, pepper, the basics, and you're in business. Just don't add too much stuff to your tomato sauce, please. Don't add too much. Keep it simple.
I'm a pesto guy myself.
I'm also a pesto guy.
I get inflammation from the tomatoes. Nightshades give you inflammation. If you guys don't know about that, I don't want to burst your bubble. It's my problem. It's my problem. So I'm a pesto guy.
All right.
We're done.
I guess.
Awesome.
Well, listen, this was a lot of fun, and thanks everybody for joining us. And hopefully we'll get to do this again soon. Check out the link for the mixing masterclass. Follow us on all the things, Facebook, Instagram. You obviously already do. And looking forward to seeing you guys at the masterclass.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was really a lot of fun. Thanks for the amazing questions. It was really great to talk to you guys. I mean, I think it would be great if we could actually see you. It would be even better. But I mean, just hearing the questions and hearing your names and interacting with you was amazing. So thanks again, and we'll catch you guys soon.